We've got a fun project for you in this video, and we're going to be taking a look at building our little kid-size booth style picnic table. Now, if you buy the plans for this project, it comes with 3 different sizes. Today, we're going to be building the smallest of the 3. This is your typical toddler size picnic table that we're building for this example. So off the ground, the seat's at 12 and our tabletop is at 22. And then we have a bigger kids one where the seat is 4 inches off the ground and their tabletop is at 26. It's just a little bit bigger for your bigger kids. And then we also have an adult size, which the seat, of course, is 18 inches off the ground and our tabletop is 30. So you get all 3 sizes in the plans. This particular version requires 3 2x4 8-foot, and it requires 3 6-foot fence pickets. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get the parts cut up, and then we'll talk about what parts we need for this project. I'll give you all the dimensions and angles and so forth, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at putting it together. Okay, so I have all of my 2x4 parts cut. I have all of my angles made on all the various boards that require an angle. And let's go over that and talk about that. So we need one piece that is 39 inches long, and then we have a 15-degree miter on each one of those. And then we have our 2 legs, and from the long point to long point is 26 inches. And then we have a 30-degree miter at the top and bottom. And notice that this miter is running parallel where these are not. So these are opposite, these are the same, going in the same direction. Then we need one piece that is 22 inches, and again we have a 15-degree miter that is not parallel on each end. And this piece is 18¼ inches long, and then I came back and then we added that bevel to it. So these are a 45-degree bevel here. Okay, and then these pieces here, the smaller ones are 11 3/8, and then these are 13. And then all of those parts could be cut out of 2 2x4s. And that's one advantage to having the plans, is that we give you an optimized cut list of how to maximize your materials. These 2 little blocks, we don't have enough material if we're using 2 2x4s. So that's why I say the plan calls for 3. It's because of these little guys. Point being is if you have some scrap material, these are 5½ inches. They too have a 15-degree miter, and that's all you need out of that third one. So if you have some scraps laying around, then that's all you would need. So I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and put all of this together first, and then we'll look at cutting the boards for the top and the seats. Now, there is 1 or 2 additional boards that I do not have cut yet. And the reason being is I haven't decided exactly A, if we want them, and B, what size they need to be. And so I'm going to talk about that here momentarily. Being how we had to invest in an extra 2x4 anyhow for our little blocks, these boards that I'm talking about, we may not necessarily need. And I don't know exactly how long they'll be. But we'll go ahead and put all this together first, and then we'll kind of move on from there. I want to throw this idea out there to you. You may find it useful. You may not. I personally do find it useful. One of the things I build a lot of is picnic tables. And so I went, now I don't build a lot of this picnic table, but I build a lot of picnic tables in general. And the products that I build a lot of, I make me a measuring stick, because there's certain dimensions on this project that we'll use several times. So rather than fiddle with the tape measure, I'll make one of these measuring sticks, and then I can just grab that measuring stick, and I've got all the dimensions that I need for this project on this stick, and I just find it quite useful and quite easy to use. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you how I would go about utilizing this measuring stick when I'm working on this project here. So the first thing is one of the measurements are built in, and that's the length of our stick. So this is 13 1/8 inches long. Now I did mark it here just for your sake, really. So the stick itself is 13 1/8 inches long, and then I put a line at 2 inches, a line at 2 3/4, and a line at 6 3/8. So those are all of our dimensions that we need for the project. And like I said, as we get into it, I will show you how I use this stick and how I think it simplifies the construction process. Like when I'm doing a regular full-size picnic table, I have a different stick that I use. And I find it very useful, very quick, very easy to use rather than pulling out the tape measure for each one of these dimensions. Okay, so we have our 39-inch board here, and we have our 22-inch board here. And the first thing we need to do is use our measuring stick. And so I've lined up the measuring stick to the tip of my 39, and I've copied this 2 3/4 down and this 6 3/8 down. Okay, and then what I need to do is turn it around and do the same thing to the other side. Mark 2 3/4, mark 6 3/8. Okay. So that's how that measuring stick comes in handy. And then I'll show you how the other piece of the measuring stick that we're going to be using as well. So now we have our leg piece here. I've lined it up to the end here, and then I just drew a line right there at our 13 1/8. So that is just the length of the board. As you can see, I've got that little tick mark there now. And I need to do the exact same thing on the other leg. And we'll show you how we use all these little tick marks to put it all together. Okay, this bit, I'm gonna try to explain it the best way I know how, but I'm gonna pre-warn you, it might be just a touch confusing. So what I try to like to do is I try to avoid dimensions at all possible. So what I typically will do is I will figure out connecting points. So in this particular example, this board here, this is our leg, it's flush here, okay? This is at a 30-degree angle, or that's what the angle's supposed to be, but the connection point, the face of this leg is right there at that very connection point, okay? So I don't know what the dimension is from the tip of this to here. I have no idea. But I do know that the face of this is supposed to connect to that, okay? Same thing over here. We're flush up top. We're connecting right there. The face of this is connecting at that corner. So that's good. Now, when you're placing your leg, I say we're flush at top. We are flush at top. You can see that, okay? So we are flush, but this is not necessarily at a 30-degree angle. It's close. It might be 31. It might be 30 and a half. It might be 29. It's close, but it's not exactly 30, okay? So what we did is we make a tick mark from the tip up to here. According to the computer, we know that's supposed to be 13 1/8 inches. So we've done the same thing here, 13 1/8 inches. Now, on the leg, we know, according to the computer, from the tip to here should be 6 3/8. So all we kind of have to do is connect those two. Just like that. So if we were to draw a straight line down, those two would connect, right? And then so we come over here and we would do the same thing. But there's only one problem. You can see we're basically right on this line. The top of this is right in line with that, but where is our 6 3/8? How far away is it? Oh, we might be a ½ inch off or so, okay? And that's because these legs are not necessarily exactly 30 degrees. If everything was exact, right, then it would all line up perfectly. But the fact that it doesn't, it's not a big deal. The main thing is that the top of this board lines up with that tick mark. That's one of the main things, okay? That's probably the main thing. But so what I do is I'll line it up here. When I'm doing this for real, I'll line it up. Those two are lined up, let's say. And then I come over here and I look and I'm like, oh geez, how far off are we? Well, we're probably a ½ inch off. So what I'll do then, if we're a ½ inch off, I'll just slide it over 1/4 inches, right? So I'll just slide it over 1/4 inch. and that takes care of it. This dimension, you know, yes, we do want it left or right centered, but it's not critical. It doesn't really matter if we're off a ½ inch, okay? It doesn't really matter if this is at 29 degrees instead of 30 or 31 degrees or whatever, that we don't have that exactly 30 degrees. We're close enough. So anyhow, I get this close. I approximate it. Could you measure the distance from here to here and here to here and make that equal? You could do all that, but it's not necessary. Just get it, just eyeball it, get it close, pop in a couple of screws, and you're on to the next step. I did go ahead and skip ahead a little bit, but I'll explain what we did here. So what I did here is these are our 13-inch boards here. And remember, we came in, we made that mark at 2 3/4. So I just took two 3.5-inch screws. I have this kind of policy that if we can use 3.5-inch screws, then we use 3.5-inch screws. When we're putting together two 2x4s, obviously we can't use 3.5-inch screws. But because we're going from a 2x4 into a long 2x4, then obviously we have room for 3.5. So we'll always use 3.5 there. So anyhow, two 3.5-inch screws to mount this board. Of course, that's flush. And then we took our 11 3/8 board, that's our leg, and we used two 3.5-inch screws from this way. And then we have our 5.5-inch board, and we just used two 2.5-inch screws to attach that to our leg piece. And of course, we did the same thing over here. Two 3.5s here. Let me show you the front here. 13-inch board, 11 3/8 going down, and then you can see our two 2.5-inch screws into our leg for our little seat support here. Okay, so our next step is to go ahead and build out our top and put our seat boards in place. So our seat board is going to be 23 inches, and then our top is going to be 23 inches as well. And so we're going to need 4 pieces of 23 for our top, 2 pieces of 23 for our 2 seats, and then we'll need a couple other pieces to hold our top pieces together. And then this bracket, this will become our bracket once we get our top in place. This lines up to the bottom of our 2x4, and of course we'll attach that with 3.5-inch screws, and then attach this side to our top with 2.5-inch screws. So very, very simple project, very easy project to put together. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, and we'll get our seats mounted, and I'll show you that, and then we'll work on putting our top together. So we have our seat boards in place, and we just centered our 23-inch board onto our frame. So we have the same overhang on both sides. And then what I did is I found center, and then I went ahead and just tacked in our angle support going this way with two 2.5-inch screws. Now, once we get our top in place and we get this all leveled off and what have you, we will run up some 3.5-inch screws from the outside up at an angle to really give this support some good support. So our next step then is just to go ahead and make our top and get that installed, and then this one will basically be ready to go. So I'll show you what we're going to do there on the top. Okay, so this is our top. It is 22 inches roughly, give or take, and then it's 23 inches long. So you can see what we did. We used one full width fence picket to hold those 4 boards together, both sides, and then we split this fence picket in half to 2.5 inches wide for this cleat, and then we used another full one here in the middle to support this, but also our angle bracket is going to sit on this as well, and that'll give us some additional thickness of material to screw to. Okay, now it doesn't really matter which direction we put this on because it's roughly a square. It's 22 by 23, so it's roughly a square. So what we're going to do though is we're going to apply the top to the wide board to sit on top of that one, okay? If that makes sense. Hopefully that makes some sense to you. So that's what we're gonna do. And then this will give us, because if we were to set it on this side, then we wouldn't have nothing to screw to. We need to screw from that piece into our top. And you'll kind of see how that all works. Now, I just have this put together temporarily with 1-inch staples with my Ryobi stapler, the narrow crown stapler. So I just have this put together temporarily with 1-inch staples. I've got to run and get some 1-inch deck screws because I ran out yesterday. And go ahead, and everywhere there's a staple, there's two staples, I'm going to put a screw. So I'm going to come back in, screw all that together before we mount it to our table itself. I think you can see it okay what we did here. So you can see here we have 4 screws, and they're kind of put in at a bit of an angle, so it's catching the meat of this horizontal piece, and then it's screwing into this 5.5-inch piece right here and the top. So just put it at an angle. You know, we're coming down roughly 1 inch and a quarter down, and then putting it at a bit of an angle because the screw is 2.5 inches long. So we want to be careful that we don't poke through our top, but we also want to get into that wood a good bit as well. All right. So that's how we attach the back first, and then we went ahead and repositioned our angle bracket to make sure that our top was square. So you can see here in the video how the seat here and the top is nice and square to the seat. You know, obviously that's what we were looking for. Now, there is one more thing to talk about, and that is my mistake. Now, is it a big thing? No, it didn't turn out to be a big thing, but it's just something to be mindful of. Is really these horizontal pieces in the plans are shown on the inside, okay? Now, did that make a little bit of difference? It did, because our overhang should have been 2 inches, but basically we're 1.5 inches off. That should have been flipped, and so instead of 2 inches, it's now 2 3/4 inches. Again, it's not a huge deal, but that's just something to be mindful of. Really, that should have been flipped around. But that wouldn't have affected our angle brace or anything like that anyhow. So, you know, sometimes you just got to make it work. And like I say, you can see now that everything's nice and square, and it's doing what it's supposed to do. And when you're out here pushing down on this tabletop, you know, there's a little bit of give because the ground's uneven, but you could tell the top is nice and secure. You know, you can push down as hard as you want on that, and you're not going to hurt that. You could probably sit on it, and it's really not going to hurt anything. So we'll get it all staged up and go from there. One other thing I did want to share is in the very beginning, I alluded to a couple of pieces that I hadn't cut that I may or may not need and didn't know the length of. And what I had originally planned on possibly doing is, remember, this piece is supposed to be on the inside. And so I had toyed with the idea of putting in a 45-degree angle piece here in the corner to strengthen this a little bit if this was, you know, if I felt it needed it. But in this case, because our distance is not that great, I didn't feel it was necessary. One other thing I'll point out, as long as we're sitting here talking about this, the distance from our table edge to our seat edge here, that's facing back, is 3 inches. And I just kind of guessed at that. There's real no rhyme or reason to it. My concern is if our seat is back even further, then for the littles, they might have a tough time reaching the table. But if you have a little bit bigger kids, or if you want to sit at it with your kids, then you're going to want that seat back just a little bit. On a traditional picnic table for adults, that space is 6 inches. So that's what I make it anyhow, because I'm a big guy, so I like a little bit extra space there. So that's just another consideration, that if you wanted just a little bit more room there for a little bit bigger kids, like I have a 5-year-old, but I also have 10-year-old, and so, you know, like a little. Now she's skinny, so she can sit right at the table, no issues. But a little bit more space there may not be necessarily a bad thing. So that's just something else to consider. You might want to make that horizontal piece just a little bit bigger, so you had a little bit more space there between your seat and your tabletop. But that's it. That's all for this one. And like I said, I'll get it all staged up and I'll show you what it looks like when it's all done.